Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thanks to Tech Team for managing it last minute. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
May I request Dr. Nandini to take it forward?
Yes. Before we go ahead, I would like to remind all the participants that at the end of the session, we will be posting the feedback form. So they should fill it up because that is required for making our e-certificates. So please don't forget to fill in the feedback forms. Let me now introduce you to all of you, our guest for the day, Dr. Parthu Ray. Dr. Parthu Ray is currently Professor of Economics at the Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta, where he teaches courses on macroeconomics, global political economy, issues in monetary policy, and crisis and contagion. He has been actively involved with teaching in various executive development programs and consulting projects. He has a rich work experience at the IMF and worked in the specialist cadre of economists in Reserve Bank of India's Economic Research Department. Educated in Kolkata, Mumbai, and Oxford, he has written extensively, authored several books, contributed in research journals and conferences. As an economist, he has contributed to various projects of the Niti Aayog, 7th Patient Goal Council, among others. I request you, sir, to deliver your lecture on COVID-19 and the global economy. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, can you share your PPT?
Yeah, sure. It's great to be here. Dr. Bagla, Dr. Sengupta, other dignitaries and friends. It's my privilege to be invited on in this very interesting seminar and on this historic moment. I feel very proud to be part of that unveiling of your new logo. So in some sense, my job is easy. In the sense, I'm going to talk on the global economy. So the difficult questions on India, what is to be done at the current juncture, you possibly have to leave it for someone else. Okay, having said that, let me now share my screen. I have a PPT. How long can I talk? What would be the duration?
Say about an hour.
About an hour. Okay, so till 4:30 or so. Okay.
Yes, yes, yeah. And then we'll throw questions at you.
Okay, sure. Perfect. So let me share the screen. Yes. Are you able to see this screen?
Yes, sir.
It's visible? Okay, right.
Yeah. Can you enlarge it?
I can enlarge it, definitely.
Make it a slideshow, maybe.
This is also okay, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is also okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
In some sense, it is difficult to talk on this. The reason is we are very much into it. And where you are into any phenomenon, what happens, there is an implicit cognitive bias. The bias in this case could be one of pessimism. So, world comes to an end tomorrow, everybody is going to die, that kind of a pessimism one comes to. So therefore, as I term my talk today, I'm going to speculate and share our collective confusion. That's in some way. And I'm going to talk on COVID-19 and the global economy with some peripheral references, very occasionally on India. I mean, you have, I know you are on day after tomorrow, you have a full session on India. So brief outline what I'm going to talk. Very briefly, dimension of the pandemic. In this day of WhatsApp, we are constantly reminded of the latest numbers. We will then move to global economic impact. I'll talk on policy package, and then perhaps I will conclude the lecture with a sense of way ahead. That's the plate there. So first, the dimension. This is, we know, just to remind ourselves as a background, as basically for ready reference. First, in terms of the it is, of course, a large family of viruses, the coronaviruses. They are group related to RNA, the ribonucleic acid, And we knew it, but this particular virus, of course, we didn't know. We have seen the SARS attack earlier, and the most recently discovered coronavirus causes this particular disease, COVID-19. So, the reason we need to have a sense of this is there's a large literature in management, whether there's a black swan event or a gray rhino event. The black swan being something we didn't know at all. We hardly get to see them, whereas the gray rhino is something you see them, but they're too much visible, and therefore you tend to neglect them. So there's still a confusion among management experts whether this is a black swan event or a gray rhino event. You know the timeline, just for the sake of reminding ourselves, the crisis is not too old. The first time we heard it, perhaps, is 31st December 2019, when the Wuhan Municipal Health Commission reported a cluster of cases of pneumonia in Wuhan, and then subsequently the novel coronavirus was identified. So that's 31st December, today in May, so it's roughly kind of 4.5 months old. And in that sense, even in January, we are groping in the dark. It's only on 11th March that WHO declared a pandemic. So by that thing, it's less than 2 months old. And it's very, very curiously, by April 8, after 11-week lockdown, Wuhan lifted restriction on outgoing travel, and after reporting a very dramatic decrease in cases. So as far as China is concerned, that was definitely the originator, in that sense, the place of origin. But by April 8, that particular place, there has been complete flattening of the curve. Only, counterfactual could have told us it's in Wuhan, therefore, in somewhere in the hinterland of China, and not in Shanghai or Beijing. Had it happened there, the impact could have been much, much more. Moving forward, as of now, we know roughly something like 4.3 million confirmed cases. We know we have recovered something like 1.6 million, and the global death number is quite high, something like 293,000 people. And if you see the left-hand side, there has been almost an exponential growth. The cases passed 1 million on 2nd April. 2 weeks later, they hit 2 million. By 28th April, the number of cases passed 3 million, and cases passed 4 million on 10th of May. So it's exponential growth, and so far the number is something like 4.3 million. Going forward, this is perhaps heartless, but as economists, we cannot really evaluate the loss of human life. But end of the day, as economists, we are going to talk today on economic impact. So the human death is sad, awful, anywhere, everywhere in the world, but we will be somewhat dispassionate in terms of evaluating its economic impact. Okay, this is from the WHO. And very conspicuously, lo and behold, the country where from it has come, China, now stands at the 11th place. It now stands at the 11th place with total number of cases to be 82,000. And of course, the number of deaths there is something like 4,600. Very conspicuously, purely in terms of total number of cases, India stands next to China. This is sad, but again, remember, because of larger population, in terms of death per million population, both India and China, India is perhaps lowest in the world. The only comparable country where you get death 1 million of population at 2 is Bangladesh. Otherwise, and very conspicuously, the countries you talk of G7, the cream de la cream countries, the countries which take all the shots takes all the economic decisions, namely US, Spain, UK, Italy, France, and Germany, the 6 out of the G7 countries are in the top 10. Top 10 in number of total cases, huge number of deaths as well. So therefore, the impact of the COVID-19 is hugely high because whole advanced world has been affected. Despite a high income level, they have been affected because one tends to associate certain health indicators, certain mortality indicators with income. I mean, richer people live longer. That's a heartless statement of the economics thing. But this is beyond that because the richer people have been affected. But the only country that is not in the first top 25 and G7 country is Japan. And curiously, in terms of longevity, in terms of average mortality, Japan is, purely in terms of longevity, Japan is very, very high. There is a high probability an average Japanese female might see her 87th birthday, an average Japanese male might see his something like 84th birthday. So excepting Japan, all the G7 countries are very much top tier and led by US, then Spain, UK, Italy, France, Germany. Now, I'm just putting forward a hypothesis. Please realize, so how did it happen? Why this has been so spread over? I mean, after all, end of it, we have just seen this was something happened in the one province of China. Why did it get spread to this extent? It is here that we are going to discuss the economic impact. So purely in terms of biology and mortality, my discussion ends here. I move down to, with keeping these numbers in your backdrop, we now move to the global economic impact. Why did it have so massive impact? To me, it appears 2 major reasons are there. First is definitely globalization. In that sense, this is the first pandemic of a globalized world. And perhaps at the same time, negligence of public health. Why I'm saying negligence of public health? The only advanced countries which are conspicuous by their absence in the 50 countries list they have seen are the Scandinavian countries. Please note the Scandinavian countries like Norway, Denmark, Sweden, all of them had extremely good health facilities, public health facilities, but they have extremely high tax rate by Western standards. So when Milton Friedman told us there's no free lunch, so the high tax rate and a good public services have come up. That possibly, again, is at hypothesis stage. One needs to do more serious work whether this can be asserted, but at least many of the Scandinavian countries have bypassed this. Now, how does it look historically? Historically, if you look, this is nothing. If you look at the HIV pandemic, purely 2005 to 12, these 7 years, you get to see death toll 36 million. The flu pandemic of 1918, the death toll was 20 to 50 million. By those sheer numbers, so far what we have seen, and I'm possibly heartless here, that the COVID-19, the death toll have been much less. But why are we bothered? First, of course, we are bothered anywhere, any death of any person, anybody, anywhere in the world, we know for whom the bell tolls. But it also shows the limitation of modern medical science. And as I've told earlier, it also shows poor public health facility, and therefore public policy has its role globally in this context. Okay, it is in this context I will possibly discuss the economic impact into 2 parts. One is I'll be talking of what's happening to the main street, the real life, the GDP, employment, etc. And then I'll be talking of Wall Street, what is happening to the financial world. Because often, this is our experience, that there is quite a relationship, quite a strong relationship between the Main Street and the Wall Street. One affects the other. For example, in the 2008-9 crisis, what we have seen is the Wall Street affecting the Main Street. In this case, this is exactly the reverse. The crisis is a real sector crisis. Crisis is a biological human life crisis, but it has permeated into Wall Street. That will make the impact much more accelerated. That will make its amplitude much more higher and deep. Okay, so what are the channels to begin with before we go to the sheer numbers? First, begin with loss of human life. Loss of human life has associated health cost. To that extent, either private sector burden or public sector burden on exchequer. The lockdown leads to stoppage of production. Supply goes down. The global supply chain gets affected. Dr. Hiranand said that we were hugely dependent on China. Those things, if they do not come from China, naturally, for the time being, for a temporary period, our production is going to be affected. There will be low demand out of low income, naturally. The corporates will be hit adversely, both on the demand side as well on the production side. And there will be a gloomy mood in the financial market that will lead to lower loan capacity, leading to financial sector bankruptcy, and there will be burden on monetary authorities. And not all monetary authorities will argue are on the same plane, so they cannot handle the crisis in the similar way. I mean, RBI cannot handle the crisis in the similar way that US Fed does. Okay, now, this is an interesting chart. It shows you the growth numbers during 2000, 2020. 2020 numbers are forecast by IMF and World Bank. This is the April forecast. In the last meeting, the numbers that IMF have done. This chart tells you two very interesting things. The top one, yellow line, is emerging and developing Asia. Next, the black line is essentially emerging markets and developing economies. Then the blue one in between is a global growth, and down below is the advanced countries. Please note the projected global growth for 2020 is -3%. This is much more severe than 2008-9 crisis when the global growth was near zero. That was essentially a Wall Street crisis, a financial sector crisis. This is a Main Street crisis, human health, and the real sector crisis. This is much more. At the same time, it tells you the power of globalization. The world moves together and comes down together. If they move together, come down together, and if we now, in this day and age of post-COVID new normal, we might question the earlier story of globalization. And therefore, this pattern that we have seen for the last 20 years, we do not know. I'm speculating. Perhaps there'll be a departure in the years to come. Okay, coming to the numbers. These are the set of numbers released by the IMF and World Bank in April, where I have already said the most important thing to look at is the column for 2020. That's the projection. The column for 2020, to your utter horror, you realize everything is minus excepting three sets, excepting China, India, and basically emerging and developing Asia. So India's 1.9 growth numbers look impressive in this 2020 numbers. We don't realize that. We don't realize that the German growth is -7% this year. We don't realize that the US growth is -6% this year. This is full of minuses. We don't realize even Brazil, Mexico is minus 6.6. Saudi Arabia minus 2.3. Nigeria is minus 3.4. Again, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, because the oil price, there may be different stories everywhere, but this 2020 is full of minuses. And in this, the only two countries which look to be somewhat positive growth rate, awful by their own historical standards, but impressive by the global peers, is India and China. We don't often realize this in our tendency to be self-critical. Okay, moving forward. How much these minus numbers are actually due to this COVID attack? So this table, what it does, this rectangle, black rectangle column, it gives you the difference between January 2020 forecast and April 2020 forecast. So what it does is what has changed in the world during these 3.5 months. During these 3.5 months, what has changed? And there, to your utter horror, you realize everything is negative. All the numbers are negative, which means the IMF and World Bank have downwardly revised growth numbers of all the countries in the world. And there, India's growth numbers have been revised something like 3.9%, minus 3.9%, China's minus 4.8%. Advanced countries' growth number has been revised by minus 7.7%. Interestingly, this is the baseline scenario. And why am I saying so? This assumption of minus 3% growth rate of the global economy, 1.9% of the Indian economy is based on certain assumptions. And those assumptions essentially are that we are expecting the impact of this crisis is going to be reasonably tapering off by the June quarter. So hopefully the extent of the severe global lockdown we are experiencing are going to be relaxed by July. That's the assumption behind this. If it doesn't happen, the numbers will look more bad. Purely assuming this bad news is between January to June, we are expecting this. Nobody says that from the July numbers are going to undergo radical transformation, but at least there will be some activity are going to begin by that time. Okay, so this is what I thought the global economy looks like. Let me come to Asia now. Now, IMF, what it does, it says Asia Pacific, and therefore include Australia and New Zealand into this group. So this is essentially Asia and Pacific economies. There's again, that same peculiar trend comes in. In the top, the advanced Asia are essentially Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Macau. And Hong Kong and Macau, because they are special administrative region of China, but they are treated to be advanced countries. Whereas China, like India, are part of the emerging market economies. These numbers, namely the projection of the real GDP, are all negative. That is the third column from left. In terms of emerging and developing Asia, I've already indicated that China's and India's number are 1.2, 1.9. Next year, everybody expected a plus number. That's because of low base. So India's number looks like 7.2, 7.4 as against China's 9.2. These are because of the low base. So 7.4 is a nice number, but remember 7.4 comes on the top of a 1.9 growth rate. So that's not too impressive otherwise. Again, the basic assumption is we are going to come out of the grim reality by end of June. This is what I wanted to talk about, the Main Street. The unemployment numbers, reliable unemployment numbers are not yet available, but whatever limited evidence we have seen, everywhere there is evidence of unemployment. Jobs are getting lost, pink slips are being issued. All over the world, India is no exception, but extent impact on India is much lower than the global impact. Now, when it comes to financial markets, in this case, as I said, the Wall Street followed the Main Street. When the bad news starts coming, then naturally what happens? You get to see bond yield going up. You get to see equity market coming down all over the world. S&P 500 came down, Topics came down, Euro stocks came down. Everybody came down till about first week of second week of April. What happened in first week or second week of April will come later. Again, credit spreads were hugely high. P ratios, there is a fall. Sovereign spreads were high. Equity market failed both in advanced countries as well as in emerging markets. Again, taking the cue from Main Street. Let me come to financial impact more seriously. Now, I'll just look at very few markets just to get a hang of what happened across the advanced countries in the globe. Because when it comes to financial markets, most of the times, the emerging markets finance followed the advanced market. So it's essentially what happens to 2 square kilometers in the earth, namely 1 square kilometer in Wall Street and another square kilometer in city of London, seems to dictate what's happening everywhere else in the financial market in the world. So S&P 500, very steep fall, but again, there's a rise. There's a rise sometime in April. Okay, so financial markets sometime in rise. Do you get to see that the similar reduction in death numbers or COVID-19 impact has been falling in the United States? The answer is an unequivocal no. So after April, the financial markets got delinked, somewhat delinked from the Main Street, somewhat delinked from the COVID attack. Why is it so? I'm coming to that story within the next 2 minutes. This is S&P 500. Look at this, the more focused index, the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Steep fall, again, coming up since April. This is an interesting chart. This is in the Chicago Board of Stock Exchange, this thing called VIX, which essentially measures market expectation of near-term volatility. So near-term volatility, since it's measured, the very popular expression of this is called VIX. VIX is something like a fear index. So how much fearful you are about the financial sector. And if you see, there's a steep rise from February to March to April. From April, the VIX also have started falling. So the pattern that you have seen in the equity market, you have seen the pattern in the fear index as well. They have started coming down since April. Again, in London FTSE, you get to see the similar thing. Okay, in bond market, yield, you have a very steep rise, then things started falling. Now, what happened really? So there must be something seriously interesting happened. What happened to the Forex market? Now, in Forex market is full of riddle, and the clue to this riddle is a currency called dollar. Try to understand this, that at this current juncture, which is a country which has reported the highest number of deaths and highest incident of COVID in United States. Had it been any other country, that affected country's currency would have depreciated. Now, United States dollar is a peculiar thing. It's like it takes as if it takes it the role of God. So whenever you are fearful, you take refuge with the God. So you are fearful about any other currency. So take it to the currency called safe haven. You call that safe haven? Give me a break. I mean, essentially, United States dollar becomes a currency of familiarity, and therefore, a peculiar thing happens whenever there's a crisis in the US. In many a time we have seen earlier that United States dollar gets appreciated. This happened with respect to euro. This happened with respect to pound sterling. Okay. So in this situation, we have seen that the real sector numbers are pretty bad. We have seen the financial sector numbers were pretty bad till about April. From April, things have started moving up. But still then, as I said earlier, we do not know enough. Economic fallout, we do not know enough because the assumptions are huge. The number of assumptions behind those minus 3% growth rate number. We do not know the pathway of the pandemic. I said you're assuming from July things are better. We do not know the intensity and efficacy of containment effort. For example, we know in India that yes, the migrant laborers have been affected, but how much migrant laborers will not go back to their earlier profession and how much future activity is going to be affected, we do not know. We have no estimate on this. We do not know the extent of supply disruption. We do not know the repercussion of dramatic tightening of market conditions, shift in spending pattern, could be behavioral changes. Tomorrow we may be scared to go to a shopping mall or moving to using public transportation. Think of Mumbai trains. This seriously confidence effect, and the commodity prices are hugely volatile. And in commodity prices, because we are huge buyer of oil, we always feel happy about the downfall of oil prices. But please do remember that when oil prices fall, the oil producing countries' income fall as well. To that extent, therefore, the migrant laborer who are there in Middle East, in Abu Dhabi, in Saudi Arabia, they are going to lose their job. So we'll have lower remittances as well. So the net effect of an oil price fall could be very, very difficult to estimate. So this is what I wanted to say as far as the global impact is concerned. And we have indicated there's a disconnect between the financial markets and the real sector, the GDP from April. And this is here I bring the global policy package. Now, unfortunately, economists' notion of policy package is very, very limited. I'll have a very short digression to explain. In the typical policy space typology, economists bifurcate into macro policy and then structural policy. Structural policy, they leave it to others, is a macro policy that typically looks at the economist domain. So this is fiscal policy or this is monetary policy. So fiscal policy is essentially tax, rate, government expenditure. Monetary policy is repo rate. Also, at some way, you can think of the exchange rate as well via the tensions of impossible trinity. But there are structural policies. There could be social sector expenditure, saving the financial sector, public institution, the kind of self-reliance that the Prime Minister has said yesterday. These comes part of the structural policies. So if you think of this, what happens as a result of the attack at the current juncture, we are in the left side diagram as if even if the potential is unchanged, we are at a very low ebb in our business cycle. We are there at the trough. So you are not having consumption. You have enough consumption demand. You are not having enough investment demand. You are not having enough external demand. The only guy who can rescue you is the government. So if you remember your essential macroeconomic identity, y equals c plus I plus g plus x minus m, is a g, the government expenditure that is supposed to rescue you. But please do remember that government expenditure rescue you both in the interim in terms of a tax cut, in terms of SOPs, At the same time, government needs to rescue you in terms of structural policies, building more hospitals, and so on and so forth, essentially in terms of building health infrastructure. Please note that in this case, what happens, if you think of the classical demand-supply diagram, let me explain just for a minute. I thought without one diagram, people won't be sufficiently interested in economics audience. So essentially, the AD1 curve is the current period of demand. And SRAS is a short-term aggregate supply. What happens at the current juncture? There is a short-term shortage. So the country moves from a point like A to a point like B. And a point like B, there is an output fall. So what you need to do is push back demand as well as push up supply. So you need to work on both the sides, both on side of demand and on side of supply. Unfortunately, please do remember that policies are not free. There are trade-offs. Policymakers are not magicians who are capable of pulling rabbit out of their hat. What are the trade-offs? In fiscal policy, there are crowding out trade-off. So if the government expenditure comes up, private expenditure won't. Now that trouble is not there at the current juncture. That's not there because anyway, private investment is not coming up. But there is a more fundamental trouble, namely government has a wallet or a purse. It has a budget constraint. So budget constraint is expenditure plus interest payment on past borrowing should be equal to revenue, tax or non-tax plus borrowing. So whenever any government is spending some money, please ask this unpleasant question, where from are you getting your money? Because if it's from your tax, if by taxing you, then you should not be happy. If it's from borrowing you, then your sons and daughters should not be happy. Your next generation, they have to pay it back. So therefore, remember, whenever government spends, what is the notion of the government borrowing constraint? Do not suffer from this, very temporary euphoria that government is spending huge amount of money, remembering they are not magicians who can pull the rabbit out of the hat. There are huge trade-offs in monetary policy as well. There are trade-offs between growth and inflation, what you call the Phillips curve. There are implication of open economy and closed economy consideration. Say suppose in a situation when only RBI reduces the repo rate, and suppose Fed has not done so, then relatively speaking, India will be seen as less lucrative for the fund to come in. In that case, there will be outflow of fund. If there is outflow of fund, there will be pressure on rupee will get depreciated. And there are tensions of impossible trinity. No central banker can have all the three nice things, namely a fully floating exchange rate, fully independent monetary policy, and no capital controls. So this puts the policymakers' job to be difficult. Now, what has been the global policymakers' job? What have they done? In some sense, first, there is a multilateral aspect and a bilateral aspect. In multilateral aspect, IMF started, both IMF and World Bank have said number of things. IMF said emergency financing. They talked of augmenting existing lending program. They talk of debt relief. They talk of new financing arrangement. End of the day, please do remember, IMF does not have much money in these kitties. And therefore, this is essentially for very poor countries in sub-Saharan Africa, or maybe Latin America, or one or two Asian countries. This is not for the G20 countries. So you can't expect, you can't get a solace that you are taking a loan from the IMF window. So what happened then? I'll just discuss one country for the brevity's sake, namely United States. What has happened? Many of the other countries followed similar. Now, first, in terms of fiscal stimulus, all over the world, there has been fiscal stimulus. Finland, this is 30%. Mexico, this is much lower, something like less than 1%. India's, before yesterday, the number was very low. It was something like anything between 0.8 to 1.2. We need to see today's finance minister's announcement, and consequent to yesterday's prime minister's announcement, I would expect this number to be much higher. And yesterday, prime minister indicated this is something like 10%. And if it is 10%, then it is comparable to United States, because United States number is something like 10%. But this is just fiscal, so I'm not too sure whether ours is both fiscal as well as monetary. Number one. Number two, these does not include what is called credit guarantee. Now, credit guarantee in some sense is contingent. You are not giving it directly. You're not giving money directly. You are giving money provided you have a trouble. So if you add the credit guarantees, then for example, the numbers for Italy is something like, hold your breath, 40%. So Italy, if you add credit, the fiscal stimulus is not that much, but the credit guarantee is huge. Now, this is as far as the fiscal stimulus is concerned. I've earlier indicated that there is a disconnect between the monetary policy, there's a disconnect between the Wall Street and the Main Street. And the Wall Street, the equity market, the bond market, all of them started shooting something like mid-April. And I said, I'll come to the reason thereof. So the reason for this is essentially the US Fed policy actions. What they did, they went on a buying spree. In another way, they went on, figuratively, metaphorically speaking, they went on printing money. And first, they cut the federal fund rate. They've cut the federal fund rate. It is total 1.5 percentage points they have cut. It has been brought down now to a range of 0% to 0.25%. That's absolutely the minimal. We have not seen a negative interest rate in the US so far, but we have seen a negative interest rate in Europe. We have seen a negative interest rate in Japan. They've given a forward guidance. They said, hey, this is like earlier what they have done in the Great Recession of 2007 to 9. They said they're going to buy various kinds of securities on a spree, and they supported financial markets and they supported corporates directly, not via. In the sense, the security purchase, they lend it to securities firm, they backstop money market mutual funds, they had repo operations. Not only that, they encouraged, of course, banks to lend, direct lending to banks, temporarily they relaxed regulatory requirement, direct lending to major corporate employers, even commercial paper funding facility. They supported loans to small and mid-sized business. They supported state and municipal borrowing. This is interesting because you often tend to hear these things in India. That a number of state governments have said that we are not getting our GST money in the last quarter, therefore RBI should buy our securities so that we can get money. So this has happened actually in US. And they opened up an international swap lines. International swap lines we first experimented during the 2007 to 9 crisis, during the Great Recession, and now they had, with almost all the advanced countries, they have a swap line, which essentially means you bring your currency, look at that day's exchange rate, you take dollars. So there is no paucity of dollar liquidity. How much they have done? They have done enormously. So if you look at that chart, this is the US Fed balance sheet. So the US Fed balance sheet size was around 800 billion with a B before the global financial crisis of 2007-8. they touched something like 4 trillion by 2010. And then it again increased, but from 2018, it started coming down. This had a huge increase. How much liquidity they have injected? They've injected something like 2.5 trillion with a T within this 4 months, January to April. So the financial markets growth that you have seen, the financial markets uptick that you have seen in the bond market, in the equity market, in the forex market, all is a direct offshoot of this endeavor by the US Fed. And similar things have been done by the Bank of England, Bank of Japan, or Euro or the ECB. Everybody have done it. Now, obviously, at this juncture, you have legitimately, you can ask the question, how could they do it? They can do it because people have faith in their currency so far. Try to understand, end of the day, a currency is a piece of paper and a promissory note. So if it's a promissory note, as long as it's backed by what? Old days it was backed by gold, is primarily backed by certain government paper. Now, if they are backed by certain government papers, there has to be demand for this paper. Now, these countries are all capital account convertible, so their papers will be bought by everybody. So the US paper will be bought by US banks, they'll be bought by India, they'll be bought by Honduras. So all over the world, they are going to buy. As long as there is demand for those security, as long as you think those countries, those 4, 5, 10 countries are the epitome of safety, you are going to buy this. And they can do as long as this happens. So in fact, when Bernanke was asked, how long can they do it? How much the Fed balance sheet can be? He jokingly reportedly said infinity. Infinity because this is as long as you have the faith. And I'm not speculating on what happens if this faith is not there. That's kind of a doomsday. I mean, we are not here to discuss in that kind of a doomsday. Okay, so essentially what we have, the pandemic has led to a multi-layered crisis. It has led to a health shock. And let me just have two minutes on this health shock. What happened during the peak of from almost like, early to late 80s onwards, which for want of a better term, people refer to as the Reagan-Thatcher revolution. What has happened, many of these advanced countries have completely privatized their health facilities. So this is insurance-based market. And in many cases, they did not function very well. So you have one model of the Anglo-Saxon model of healthcare, which is essentially insurance-led market, where the government expenditure is not that much. Whereas you have the other model in the Scandinavian countries, where government takes care of health and education, but hugely you pay a huge tax rate. Now that's a trade-off. I presume the citizens of those countries have preferred a low tax rate and a low expenditure on health and education, and therefore you have this. There are domestic economic disruptions. There's a huge plummeting of external demand. And this is also serious when we say, like, India really can say self-reliance, because India is a large country. And the driver of India's growth is consumption. So we can afford to have this. But a smaller country which does not have the luxury of big consumption, they cannot afford to be dependent only on consumption. They need external demand. So this is here. For example, if US thinks in the same way, complete self-reliance in the field of IT, you realize our services sector are going to be affected as well. There may be possibility of capital flow reversal, and that so far there's huge amount of liquidity sloshing around. I have just now have shown you 2.5 trillion US dollar has been pumped in the global economy within 4 months. So therefore, some of this money comes to us as well. And commodity prices have collapsed. And I've already said collapsing of commodity prices is not necessarily a good thing for the producing country. It may be a good thing for the consuming countries. So there is also risk of a worse outcome could predominate. So I'll take another maybe 5 to 7 minutes just to discuss the way ahead. How do you see the future? How do you see the new normal? So the immediate priority would be to contain the fallout. You have to increase the healthcare expenditure to strengthen the capacity. You have to adopt measure that reduces contagion. And you understand one of the measures we have adopted is therefore lockdown. The other measures that you can adopt is huge number of testing. But you have seen there are different models in different countries depending on their resources, availability, capability. So our India's performance on testing front is not very good. But economic policies need to cushion the impact of the decline. And remember, people, firms, and the financial system. All the 3 things you need to be thinking about. Policies that need to reduce persistent scarring effect from this unavoidable severe slowdown. You need to ensure that the economic recovery can begin quickly. But this is the immediate priority. So let me sum up. Where are we? We are in uncharted territory. What were the last few crises you have seen? The East Asian crisis of 1999, again, a macro crisis. You know how to handle. IMF came, given them loan. Instead, they gave them bad advice as well. But somehow the East Asian countries came up. In case of the 2007, 8, 9, the global financial crisis, you knew it happened in United States and UK to begin with. It got spread over, but huge amount of money have been pumped. Monetary and fiscal stimulus has been done. So that was only 2008, 9. So around a decade back, little more than a decade back. But now what we are seeing, we have not seen long. The plague endemic or the influenza endemic of the earlier year, though the numbers were much more, the globalization effect was much less. So we are not really sure we are here in an unknown territory. And we know along with loss of human lives, adverse economic impact is going to be substantial. And the final impact that we see will depend upon how fast the incidence of and death on account of COVID-19 tapers off and the flattening of the curve happens. We have seen monetary and fiscal stimulus happening all over the world, but please do remember capabilities of different governments are different. What the US Fed can do, RBI not necessarily cannot do, because end of the day, rupee is a non-convertible currency. End of the day, the demand for rupee will not be as much as demand for dollar is. So therefore, there are capability constraints across the globe. And we need to assume there is no fresh external shock. What do I mean by that? You should not expect and suddenly some foolish country gets another war or another trade tensions. You have seen essentially that the world in the last 3 to 4 years have been hugely deglobalized. And ultimately, end of the day, the solution lies how fast the vaccine is invented. You talk of herd immunity, you talk of limited lockdown or limited relaxation, but till the time a vaccine is invented, you cannot get a solution to this. And that's exactly what history has shown us all along in earlier pandemics as well. But the new normal that could come will going to be a less globalized world. It's already started happening. It already started happening in the sense that you have seen the US-China trade war. Mr. Trump has made all those threatening things. Every odd number of days, every even days, he sort of retracted from there. But we have seen the global economy face that kind of a crisis. And the new normal could definitely be, we do not know this, how the shape of things to come. But there was a very profound thing that Dr. Hiranandani said, that, of all those 42 multinationals that are going to withdraw from China, not many has come to us. Because what in the interim you are going to see, that in case people are not comfortable with China, they will locate somewhere in between where they can bypass certain restriction. For example, Vietnam has certainly have become an absolute everybody's favorite destination when it comes to economic activity. So Vietnam, Malaysia, others can be hugely benefited from this. So net right now is an unknown territory. But one thing we know, that when you are in a crisis, you tend to suffer from a pessimistic bias. So therefore, there's no reason for that. As history has shown us, all those crises at that point of time, you feel this is the end of history, end of civilization, whereas on the contrary, within a year, 2, 2.5, 3, things get brightened up. I'm sure this is also going to be no exception. I'll stop here. Thank you very much. I think I have been within my time. Okay, I will stop sharing the screen now. Okay, I'll stop sharing the screen.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Hira here. That was truly an engaging session, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, and sir, we are now going to pose you a few questions. I'm going to put you on behalf of the participants.
Sure, please.
Yeah. So the very first question is, do you think the US economy will be paralyzed and there will be a change in balance of power on the global level?
Very interesting question, but I don't know the answer. Let me speculate a little bit here. In some sense, US economy has not been a great commodity producer for last 20 years. I mean, at this current juncture, if you think in your wallet, in your purse, in your bag, in your desk, is there anything that is made in US? So US has not been a great commodity producer. US has been essentially, their income comes from finance, intellectual property rights, and that's related to the whole scientific things, the universities, the research lab, little bit of defense, that's another thing that they have. And essentially the kind of the migration story that they have, that you want somebody can, from anywhere, if you're bright enough, you can enter US and pursue your own dream. Now, will there be a change in these in the very short term? Perhaps in the immigration story, there may be a change in the very short term. As immigration stories, definitely, I mean, you can expect to see that along with their anti-China tendency, there's going to be restrictions on H-1B visas. There are going to be restrictions on skepticism on account of this. But they also have their own limitation. The functioning did not get outsourced out of any motherhood sentiment. The functioning got outsourced by sheer economic logic. They're cheaper and good to be produced here. So as long as that remains, they're going to send it here. But if they really think of some sort of a more cocooned, non-globalized model, that's going to be difficult. But as long as finance, defense, and IPR remains, I don't think their basic model is going to be shaken. But as far as the power is concerned, we still do not know whether this pandemic is going to affect China hugely adversely, mildly adversely, or even favorably. Please do remember that only last week, China had the guts to introduce the first time in the world the central bank digital currency, which people have thought of, but it was introduced first time only last week. So I'm not too sure about this. Right now, there will be confusion. Over the next 5 to 7 years, you sort of apprehend the US their power might come down to some extent.
Right, sir. So the next question is, do you feel that negativity towards China will help India, and to what extent? And also, will there be any reprimanding China for hiding the truth to the entire world and endangering the world economy?
That's a very interesting question. And I'll be blunt. Here, one should not think of 0 and 1. So in a number line, there are infinite numbers. So when we say negativity of China, we can be pursuing our goals of self-reliance at the same time importing things from China. So it's not 0 and 1 game at all. It's like look selectively. Do not go against the principle of comparative advantage. When you pursue self-reliance, you look at your own necessities, but you do not go against the principle of comparative advantage. So will it help? First of all, this negativity, always you get to see hugely negative sentiment in the peak of the crisis. If you recall, 10 years back, 12 years back, you exactly saw the similar negativity against US Bank. And you expected all the US banks and financial institutions have come to an end. They did not. So often this huge negative sentiment in the peak of a crisis do not get fructified in the days to come.
Right, sir. So there is yet another query that the 20 crore package of reforms which was announced
You're not
yesterday,
audible.
will it?
Would
Hello?
you please repeat? Would you
Am I
please
audible
repeat?
now? Yeah, sure, sir.
Yeah.
The 20 crore package of reforms which was announced yesterday, how will it help the impact on the Indian economy and help it in its recovery path?
But this is a very easy answer. Ask the finance minister. Because we do not know the details. We do not know the details, and all such cases, devil lies in details. I mean, just the 20 crore is a broad thing. I have shown you India's fiscal package has been very, very low. It's 0.8 to 1.2% of GDP. So that's very low. This is a very positive statement that the government has realized and said they are going to spend. But in what ground, whether this is a credit guarantee, how much is the state government money they are giving, in which sector they are getting. So these are a matter of details. Hopefully, by this time we might come to know. I have not watched the television while I was talking. So after the finance minister's announcement is known, we will come to know about this. So the short answer is yes, this should help, but I do not know how and which sector it would help, because they will always lie in detail.
Perfect, sir. Another question is, what will be the impact on foreign remittances, especially when we see that there are instances of reverse?
I'm sorry, you have not been very audible. You got broken in between.
Hiral, please switch off your video and then it will be easier. You'll be audible. Switch off your video.
Okay, sure.
Hiral? Not Partha, sir. I was talking to Hiral.
Okay.
Hiral, can you hear me? Partha, sir, you may put your video on.
Yeah, I've clicked up.
Yeah.
That's right.
Because she was her.
No, that's fine. So if you could please repeat, I didn't hear it.
Hiral, can you come back?
Could you please repeat your question?
Yeah, sure, sir.
Put your video off. Put your video off. put your video off.
Okay.
Yes?
Yeah, I have done that, ma'am. Yeah.
Your video
So
has to be
I repeat the question.
Yeah.
Yeah. What will be the impact on foreign remittances when there are instances of work migration taking place?
Okay.
Should I repeat?
Yeah, no, I've heard it. Good question. Now, again, as earlier, if you see Indian foreign remittances, they come from three major sources. One is white collar jobs from US and Europe, and blue collar jobs from Middle East. Again, broadly speaking, and we have been very lucky on remittances. In fact, thank God the IT and remittances that our current account deficit is manageable. Otherwise, our trade deficit is huge. Our current account deficit would have crossed to something like 5 to 6% of GDP had not remittances and IT been doing the work that they're doing. Now, immediate future remittances is going to be down. And this is going to be down for two reasons. Europe and US growth numbers are cut. And at this current juncture, with Mr. Trump there's a hugely cocooning of the United States. Europe also is thinking in terms of, there has been huge impact from them as well. So there will be some cold feet on account of Europe and US. And because of the oil price so far, the construction activity has been going on Dubai, we are aware of, but what's happening to the rest of Middle East, we do not have enough clarity. But if the oil price becomes at this level, if it happens at this level for the next 3, 4, 5 months, then definitely remittances are going to be hot. And the implication for that is your current account deficit is going to be higher as well. Only cushion being, in current account deficit, the low oil price is going to benefit you. So net, I mean, it will be foolhardy on my part to speculate what exactly will the impact, the negative impact of the remittances, and the positive impact on account of oil imports.
Right, sir. So another query is, can the change in consumption pattern play a game-changing role for Indian economy if we move towards Swadeshi or go local, as Mr. Prime Minister mentioned yesterday?
I'll be honest. Consumption, again, I'm talking purely as an economist without a specific reference to Prime Minister's announcement. Consumption patterns are very difficult to change. Very difficult to change overnight. People, if they get good Indian stuff at not so expensive prices, definitely they are going to buy. But if they get cheaper and similar quality Chinese stuff, I'm not too sure how there will be a tension between your patriotic element and the classical economic man in you. You understand what I'm saying? Essentially, therefore, we have to produce good quality at a reasonably lower price, then definitely that consumption pattern will come. But per se, this, changing psychological behavior, changing behavioral pattern is going to be difficult. Unless, of course, as you know, we have now the theory of nudge. So if the Prime Minister's nudge is going to change our behavior, is altogether will be clear in the days to come.
Right. Okay, so the next question is, how is this crisis going to affect global income inequality level?
They're going to be increased. Because clearly, one thing it happens, purely if you think of just one component called health expenditure, and I have already said public health expenditure is not very great in the so-called emerging markets.
Right.
And if the poor spends quite a lot on health expenditure, number one. Number two, if they lose their job on account of immigration, both internal and external, they're going to be hurt, and therefore there would be increase in inequality as well. But right now, this is not the time to think of it. It all depends upon how fast we are going to hit back. If we can hit back by July, start hitting back by July, then you get to see a temporary increase in inequality. But if you take a year and a half to hit back, you completely see a different kind of a story.
Right, sir. So there is yet another query that in this kind of challenging situation, which economic model should a developing nation like India can adopt?
I don't understand which economic model means. Sorry.
Which economic model? So what kind of economic model do you propose for India?
Oh, if you think of model, whenever there's a crisis, everybody becomes a Keynesian. Whenever there is a crisis, everybody becomes a Keynesian. They try to do what essentially monetary and fiscal stimulus can do. So it's therefore it's
Right.
the time of government intervention. The only thing being, it should not suffer from a toothpaste syndrome. When the spending is now, in good times, they should go back. Because end of the day, you do not want a hugely big government. Often that the experience is that withdrawal from the earlier thing becomes difficult. We have seen, at least in the US, they've started withdrawing from 2015, 16 onwards. They did it for 2.5, 3 years. Again, they have hit back. So essentially, in such a situation, everybody is Keynesian. But when better times come in, the government should do more efficiency-led growth.
Right, sir. Though you have already answered, there is yet another question like, after lockdown, is the bankruptcy going to increase?
Globally, yes. Globally, yes, but it all depends on the extent of bankruptcy. Because if you see, per se, bankruptcy is going to increase. But at least you have seen in the US Fed is directly giving money to the corporates. US Fed is buying the state government securities. To that extent, the corporate sector has been cushioned off from the dark realities. Since they have been cushioned off, to that extent, even that earlier potential increase in bankruptcy will come down. And whether the same thing is going to happen in India, I'm very, very serious about SME sector, but I do hope in the Prime Minister's package that the Finance Minister is announcing today, there should be substantial chunk of money for the SME sector, for the small and medium, micro, small and medium enterprises, because they are not only the output generator, they're also the employment generator.
Right, sir. Thank you so much for answering all the queries. It was
Pleasure.
really engaging to listen to you. Now I would like to request Dr. Nandini Sen Gupta to propose a formal vote of thanks.
Before that, Hiral, I would like to invite Mrs. Maya Shahani to add something or sum up the session. The
Yeah,
trustee
sure,
of-
ma'am.
Yeah, please unmute
Sure.
Maya, madam.
First of all, Dr. Bagla, I would like to thank you for inviting me for such an interesting session. This was really so educative, and we're all concerned about our health and our safety and the state of the economy. So this was needed, and I'm so glad we all attended this. Dr. Partha Ray, you gave such an in-depth and well-researched presentation. All my questions were answered by your presentation and the subsequent question and answer session. The one thing that bothers me is when you mention about the US infusing 2.4 trillion to 2.5 trillion of funds into the system, and it's all a matter of faith on the government bonds. This is something frightening because, I mean, how safe are these, the bonds? So this is what America is doing. Now, our Prime Minister also has said that he would be giving 20 lakh crores to kickstart the economy. But the worry is, from where are these funds going to come? You covered it, but I'd like to underline it because I'm dealing with the Indian sector here. So if we say, I mean, where are these funds going to come from? Is it going to be, if the government takes a debt, we can't fall into a debt trap. And then are the taxpayers going to pay for it? Or is the government going to print more notes? Because we can't even go on printing notes without some kind of accountability. That will create chaos. And there'll be a huge inflationary trend if we do that. So the euphoria is there, definitely. We're very happy about this package. But if I'm sure, and Prime Minister Modi does have answers to all these questions. He must have thought this through. And is this package going to come in one lump sum or in stages? Like you mentioned, which are the areas, which are the states that are going to get this? So there are many questions in our minds. So let's hope it's going to pan out in a right way and think.
Sure.
Yes, but I was really educated by your presentation, and there's so much I didn't know earlier, which I learned today. So thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Just one comment that while all these concerns are genuine, I share them. The only thing being the timing. At this time, we are bothered about just keeping floating. So in keeping floating, we need to do this thing. But yes, back of your head, we need to be concerned tomorrow when better time come in, there should be an withdrawal of all this. So the trouble often with government expenditure is, as I said, that suffer from a toothpaste syndrome. What comes out that you don't put it in. So that's exactly the concern. But at this juncture, we need to keep floating. So India's fiscal stimulus was lower. It's good that we have come up, but as I said, we need to look at the details to understand where exactly money is going, which sector, what form money is going, and how he is financing. So those are I believe, right, we'll come to know shortly.
Thank you.
It's very, very.
Thank you, Maya ma'am, for gracing this occasion, gracing this meet. And before I ask Dr. Nandini to give a formal vote of thanks, I would like to thank Professor Pathare. Me being from chemistry field, but still I found so interesting the way you put forward. And the only worry is that, I would like to put it that we have been trying to flatten the curve. So when we are flattening the curve, are we pushing the peak forward? Just that we are waiting for a relief to arrive. And is it true, or so the worst is yet to be? Has to be witnessed by us. Is it, Dr. Pathare?
So that's like what Ronald Ramsfield used to say: unknown, unknown. He said there are three things: known knowns, known unknown, and unknown unknown. This is whether we are going to see another peak, or it's actually started happening in Korea. In Korea, we have seen another peak. Whether after an initial flattening, you are going to see another peak, honestly, we do not know. But if it happens, that's going to be bad. That's going to be bad. And if we again have to undergo the similar again and a 2 months lockdown, that's going to be bad for economy, and that's going to be bad for human health as well. So that's a genuine concern to which we don't have answers to.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pathare. And I understand that, yes, you could visit us in digital space, but I would look forward to inviting you and wishing that, the things become normal, maybe different normal, not normal, but still we would like to invite you and to be amidst us, because we would like to launch this university when all of us are there, and you should visit us and constantly be in touch with the economics department of KC College and all the colleges of the board. Thank you so much.
That's great to be there. As a professional life, I have been working in Mumbai for 18 years. So in that sense, the longest period of any city I had been anywhere is Mumbai. So in that sense, I am a Pravasi Mumbaikar. So therefore, it will be a pleasure. It will indeed a pleasure to be.
So we will continue your connect to Mumbai city.
Sure.
Thank you so much. May I request Dr. Nandini to kindly convey vote of thanks?
Yes, yes. So thank you very much, Dr. Parthure, for a very well-structured and insightful lecture on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the global economy. This pandemic threatens to disrupt the global economy with fears of recession across the globe. And it has been looming in many countries and also has resulted in acute market volatility. With your detailed presentation, you have been effectively able to bring out the issues like global economic and financial implications of this unprecedented pandemic. Thank you very much, sir. I would also like to express my gratitude to Dr. Niranjan Hiranandani for permitting us to unveil the logo. We are looking forward to join the HSNC University. In your speech, you've said that it's all about the way we handle the crisis, and there will always be upturns and downturns in the economy. Now, the question is how we take advantage of this downturn. So that's a very positive statement and one of the ways to revive back our economy. I'll also like to thank Mr. Anil Harish and Mrs. Maya Shani for gracing this occasion of unveiling of this university logo. I also thank our ever supportive principal, Dr. Hemlata Bagla, for helping and encouraging the entire Department of Economics to organize a national level webinar. I thank all the principals, vice principals, research scholars, teachers, and students from across the country for the enthusiastic response to this webinar. I hope all of you have filled up the feedback form. As I said, that this will be utilized for preparing your e-certificates. So we will meet again tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Partha, sir.
Thank you once
Madam.
again, Partha,
Thank you, Maya Shani, madam.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, all participants. We'll meet tomorrow, 3 o'clock. Now, your kind permission, I will end this meeting.
Kindly go ahead.
Thank you, madam. We'll meet tomorrow, 3 o'clock.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Ravi, and the entire team of Economics Department.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, all participants. Thank you, Maya, madam.
Thank you.